believe is Thursday and goes through December the 18th. Yeah. Good morning to our Facebook family that are joining us. Um, we are introducing our December theme, the divine truth, and we're welcoming the shadow. Last week, we concluded our November series, Living as Compassionate Conduits, by focusing on the weekly theme, the grateful and cheerful receiver, recognizing that it is always activated in us. And I really like this quote from Cicero, which says, gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all of the others. Gratitude is not only the greatest of the virtues, but the parent of all others. And so, looking at last week, just a bit of a recap, we explored three ideas. The first was a question: are you ready to receive? All we need to do is to pivot ourselves in the direction of our good, to open our arms and be ready to receive the bounty that the universe has to offer. And this is something that we can do at all times. And I think the key in here for me is that I have to remember to pivot myself in the direction of my good. Point number two was a remembering and a reminder that we are worthy, that we are lovable at the very core, the very essence of our being. We are created by love, we're created in love, and we express love. This is the core of who we are. And so we know that our value is much more than our feelings. And when we become more in touch with our feelings, those that we label positive as well as those that we label negative, allows us to become big-hearted receivers and givers of the good. And then the final question that we asked last year was, last week, what are we willing to welcome? What are we willing to welcome? And when we recognize that we intentionally welcome good into our lives, that it has an impact on the breadth of our heart and the willingness and the availability to receive more goodness and the life that is breathed into us by the universe. And so today, we begin our series for December by welcoming the shadow. Now, I can hear you thinking, and I can hear some of you maybe saying out loud, why on earth would I want to welcome the shadow after all that has occurred in 2020? Isn't that enough of a shadow already? Well, let's look at the spiritual side of shadow. You know, when I saw the suggested topic for today, the first thing that came to my mind was the expression, the shadow knows. And there are some of us that are of a certain age that are on this call this morning. I see some heads nodding. May remember the radio show by this title. And interestingly enough, this radio show has been identified as one of the most popular radio shows in history. And it first aired in August of 1930 and ran until 1954. The Shadow, a fictional character played by Walter Gibson, one of the most fabulous of the pulp heroes of the 1930s and 40s. The opening lines of this detective show captivated listeners instantly, and it's still recognized today. And that opening line is, "Who knows the evil that lurks in the heart of men? The shadow knows." And so the context, if you will, from a science of mind perspective for this morning is, we ask the question, what do we learn from the shadow? What do we learn from the dark of winter or the shadow that casts in the heat of summer? What richness lives in the shadow place? Dr. Holmes provides a bit of an answer for us in our Science of Mind textbook on page 41, paragraph 3. Everyone stands in the shadow of a mighty mind with a capital M, the mind of spirit, a pure intelligence, and a divine givingness. This is the divinity of the shadow as our place of humanness. God is light and dissolves all darkness. And so, as humans in our daily life, the ego limits our thoughts and produces errant judgments. However, as we become more aware of the ego, we recognize that our ego builds up this burden of shadow in our human nature, and that we can shift the negative perception. We can look beyond the appearance, and we can seek alignment with and remember the spiritual truth of who we are. So the shadow offers us this reminder, this very subtle and very gentle reminder to remember the truth of who we are. Science of mind teaches us to look beyond conditions, to align with consciousness, to align with the divine pattern of wholeness. And when we acknowledge the reality of our life, we experience healing of the invisible wounds in our soul. When we experience the reality and recognize the reality of our life, that's when the healing takes place. You know, Dr. Holmes reminds us that there's nothing to be healed, only the truth to be revealed. And so that awareness of truth, that invisible change that takes place within us, often comes through as a feeling tone. At least for me, it's a feeling tone. You know, I feel a shift in my way of being. And that's when I am aware that some of those invisible wounds in my soul are being healed and the truth of my essence is being revealed. Welcoming the shadow means becoming aware of it and its continuous presence. Note the word, its continuous presence. It doesn't go away. It's there for a reason. It's there for a purpose. And so what is the shadow? Carl Jung defined the shadow as that what a human being would not want to be, that which we would not want to be. The shadow is the negative side of the personality. It's the sum of the unpleasant properties or traits that a person wants to hide. You know, there are some aspects of our lives that we just don't reveal for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's those feelings of being inferior or worthless or unworthy, that primitive side of our nature, one's own second personality, if you will, one's dark side. Remember, the shadow knows. No matter how much we try and hide this, every person has a shadow. And I often refer to my shadow as the other side of the Leo, my zodiac birth sign. And I may have some fellow Leos out there who recognize that, you know, you may not want to see the other side of the Leo. It's not a very pretty presentation. And I see some of you smiling because some of you may have been on the receiving end of the other side of the Leo. Not a very pretty place to be. Another aspect of the shadow is that everything that is material casts a shadow. It is in particular that the shadow makes us human. The shadow is incorporated in the conscious human mind, the darker and denser it gets. The less the shadow is incorporated in our consciousness, the less that we recognize it, the more we attempt to deny it, the darker and the denser it gets. And so there are 3 points that I would like to share with you that identify more the spiritual nature of the shadow and some of the ways that we can embrace the shadow. The first is the awareness of the shadow and a negative projection. When we become aware of our own minority feeling complex, there's a new phrase I'm introducing to you, a minority feeling complex. When we become aware of this, it allows us to put corrections in place. We began to engage in the process of cultivating different interests, making modifications to some of our routines, adopting and opening to a different point of view. When a person denies or isolates their minority feeling complex, their consciousness is impacted and they limit or never experience a correction. The results when we fail to recognize or deny these minority feeling complex is that in a moment of unawareness, we can suddenly erupt as aggression. And this goes back to my earlier example of the other side of the Leo. There was a point where it could be triggered and it would just be there. And through my own practice, through my own discipline, through my own inner work that I have done, um, it doesn't happen as frequently as it previously did. And I am so grateful for that. Um, an overinflated ego often projects the shadow onto other people. An unconscious characteristic or fault, or even a talent of one's own, is seen as belonging to another person or to another object. This is how projection plays out. Projection is always accompanied by a strong emotional reaction to a person, to an object, or to a situation. The second point for us to consider this morning is consciously dealing with the shadow, embracing and integrating the shadow. The shadow is that part that wants to live with the person in whatever form it takes. It wants to live with us in whatever form it takes. The shadow is produced when an object blocks light. And we spoke about this last Sunday concerning giving and receiving. Whenever we block the light guiding our life, we create a shadow. All we need to do is pivot ourselves in the direction of our good, turn away from and turn to. Open our arms, ready to receive all of the bounty that the universe has to offer. So it's not about ignoring the shadow. It's about embracing it, recognizing it, and inviting it to allow us to pivot, to turn the direction away from the shadow and to embrace that which the Spirit has for us. Only when we are transparent and in alignment with the source of light, as when the sun is directly overhead, does the shadow magically disappear. Recognizing the shadow can be a catalyst towards change and enlightenment. And the third point I want to share is just my own personal experience of my shadow. And my shadow work, my ongoing shadow work relates to forgiveness and control. And I thought that I had forgiveness, pretty well managed. And then I was in conversation with someone recently, and the subject of control came up. And I go, oh, there it is. There it is. That's more work to do. Um, my awareness of my forgiveness work has shown up in many forms. And then one I have shared, and I believe that I have shared it with this community before. When I say that it is safe for certain individuals to walk through the travel the streets of my mind without having to be concerned about stepping on a landmine. And what that is, it's a result of intentional forgiveness work that has included classes, workshops, seminars, prayer treatment, focused meditation involving forgiveness practitioner sessions, conversations with confidants, all of the materials that are available to us through our teaching, as well as those which are identified as adjuncts or assets to the teachings and the spiritual principles. Something I discovered about my own forgiveness work is that when I was speaking with an individual or individuals who had a shared experience of whatever it was that we were talking about, that required a shift in the conversation. What I recognized is that I could no longer talk to them about the experience because no matter how lofty our intention was and how well the conversation went, at some point there was a shift back to the wound, opening up that old wound. And so when I decided to change the conversation from hurt mode to positive work, then I was able to engage in conversation at a higher level of expression. And so I invite you to make an agreement with yourself as this has been your experience to intentionally shift your conversation from the woe is me to loved is me. Love is the essence of who I am. You know, another realization that I had in doing my forgiveness work is that when I decided that enough is enough, that I had allowed this person and this experience to live rent free in my mind way too long, way too long. It's like paying rent on items that we have in storage. We know they're there, we're not ready to release them until the last rent increase becomes the last rent increase. That last rent increase motivated me to get my stuff out of storage because I had reduced it down to the smallest storage space available. And that last rent increase was the motivator to get those 5 boxes out of there and do something with them. I've added to my current work releasing control of how the resolution is to appear. The Leo, that wonderful Leo that I embrace so lovingly, says, oh yes, I've forgiven, but I want recognition from the individual that they were wrong. I want them to acknowledge that they did me wrong or whatever it was that caused the disconnect. And of course, I'm not looking at my part. I'm only wanting from them the recognition that they hurt me and that they're sorry. And once I get that, then I can truly forgive 100%. Once there's a demonstration of contriteness and an offer to make amends for the wrong, this is the ego Leo that is talking. Reality, though, is that control is not mine to exercise over anyone except myself. When I let go and when I let God, this is 100% forgiveness. Many of my shifts have been subtle, and I recognize them quite often in a moment of personal encounter, with the individual. There's no more edge. There's no more energy that I feel that the need to project to them to repel them. I can be in their presence and not feel any angst, or even hearing the name that comes up in conversation, or when I'm speaking about a situation, speaking about it from a factual perspective without any emotional attachment to it. This is when I know that my forgiveness work is working. I'm working, I'm doing my work. Remember, our shadow can be our friend. And I love this quote from Jacob Lieberman. And he says, what we call our shadow is nothing more than an aspect of our nature waiting to be embraced and reclaimed. Isn't that beautiful? What we call our shadow is nothing more than an aspect of our nature waiting to be embraced and reclaimed. And so I have for you this morning good news and God news that is of hope and assurance. And I turn to the scriptures in the book of Psalms, Psalms 91, the first 91st chapter and the first verse. This is from the New International Version. And it reads, "Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty." Ernest Holmes, in our Science of Mind textbook on page 495, offers this definition for us. We abide under this shadow of the everlasting truth, underneath the everlasting arms of spirit. The Bible again in Ephesians 6 and 13 from the New International Version reads, "Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything, stand." And Ernest Holmes from the textbook on page 494 writes, "The armor of God is faith in the good, the enduring, and the true." And so I offer to you some life work this week if you choose to accept it. There are two spiritual practices that I invite you to. The first one is to give up worrying about what other people think about you. I'm reminded of the book that Terry Cole Whitaker wrote that says, "What you think of me is none of my business." It's a very bold statement, and it's a very true statement. We give up worrying about what other people think about us because what they think about us is none of our business. I share this quote from Anthony DeMello, and he says, "Before I was 20, I never worried about what other people thought of me. But after I was 20, I worried endlessly about all the impressions I made and how people were evaluating me. Only sometime after turning 50 did I realize they hardly ever thought about me at all." That can be an ego deflator. But the truth is, people are going on with their lives. I look back on my experience of forgiveness as I stand back and be the observer. What I see is people are going on with their lives. They're living their lives on a way that works for them. I'm the one that's sitting and holding the grudge. Once I stop worrying about them, once I start worrying about what other people think, then I live my life according to the divine plan that Spirit has for me. The second spiritual practice I invite you to engage in for this week is to name one thing you know that is within your power to change and change it. Identify one thing that you know that is within your power to change and change that. And so as we begin to pray together, I invite you to lift your thoughts as we recognize the last responders. I was listening to an interview on the radio recently with a doctor, medical doctor, who identifies himself as a last responder. And the last responders are those individuals that are with people who are making their transitions from the virus or from other life releasing experiences when family and friends and loved ones cannot be present. So let's lift them, lift the work that they do, lift the care and the compassion as we open our hearts and our minds to know the truth that God is absolutely all there is. There's one life, one power, one presence, one highest idea for good. And I know that I am unified with this power and this presence. It is the very essence of who I am. And as I embrace this truth for myself, I embrace it and I know it and I accept it for each one that lives, moves, and has their beingness as the life of pure spirit. And this includes everyone, No one is excluded from the life and the love of pure spirit. And so I speak my word this morning, remembering each person that is in service to another, not only our frontline workers, the suppliers for everything that is required for our daily living and expressing life to its fullest. I speak a word of blessing for the mind that continues to create out of itself, making all things new, that which reveals itself in my life as forgiveness and releasing control. That which reveals itself in my life is the shadow that knows the very essence of who I am, and that which reveals itself through me, saying, all is well. You are my beloved, and I am well pleased. And as the Spirit is speaking this truth to me, it is speaking this truth to each one that is present. All that is required is that we listen, that we take the time to listen to that still small voice within, recognizing that it is always speaking to us. I bless places where individuals are gathering in the name and nature of the one being, the one source of all that there is. I bless groups and cultures that are celebrating the season of light in their own individual way, recognizing the cultural conditions, keeping those traditions alive. They provide meaning and reference and a source of good, a source of belonging, a source of connectedness with each other. I bless all of our prayer requests that we hold within our hearts, those that have been expressed to our practitioners, those that may have been expressed to friends or confidants. And I know that this loving spirit, this loving guide, always provides a monosyllabic answer, yes. Whatever the request, whatever the desire, the scripture advises us to make it known unto God, make it known unto the presence that is within. Because in our prayers, we're speaking to that inner presence. And the answer is always yes. And so I'm affirming that we move forward in the direction of our yes, knowing that everything is revealing itself for our highest and best good. And so for this and so much more than I have words for, they even have ideas for at this time, I am truly grateful for. And I release this word, I release this prayer, I release this treatment into the activity and the alchemy of love and law. I know it is done, and I just allow it to be. I take my hands off of it, I let it go, and I declare it is so, and so it is. And now it is time for our participation in the law of circulation. And I invite you to read along with me in the silence, affirming our abundance. I recognize the presence of God within as the source of my abundance. Out of my abundance consciousness flows everything I could desire in life. With gratitude and thanksgiving, I now participate in the flow of uninterrupted abundance. I release this visible substance as an outer symbol of my inner supply into the physical world. This prosperity experience is evidence of my abundance consciousness. You know, I just want to add this little tagline onto here. As I am immersed in the practice of the 40-day prosperity plan, what I recognize in our affirmation of abundance is a summary of the principles of the 40-day prosperity plans. It's a recognition that the conscious flow of all that I could desire in life is now being released as visible substance an outer symbol of my inner supply into the physical world, evidence of my abundance consciousness. And so, on behalf of our Board of Trustees, I say thank you to each one who continues to give both of their time, their talent, and their service to our spiritual center. And there's a slide that offers you the opportunities to participate in the flow and in the flow of abundance. And that is, you can mail your donation, and the address is on the screen. You can donate through our secure website, and you can also text to give at 831-246-9694. And also, in gratitude for the generosity and the abundance of our community, through your sharing and participating in our Santa project, we have a challenge from a donor that allows us to include more children. And Denise is going to give us a little bit more information about this. But we have increased the number of children for our project, and our new goal is $650. And I know that we will meet that easily and effortlessly. And Denise, for our Facebook family, before we say goodbye, could you just quickly share with them the abundance for the Santa Project?
Yes, I'd be happy to. The good news is we met our $450 goal to support these 8 children that we've adopted for the Santa Project. And when I emailed the coordinator, she said she just got the names of 3 more children, and we offered to up our goal so that we could provide gifts for 11 children this year. What a blessing and a prosperity demonstration.
What a blessing. Thank you, Denise. And so we say good morning and goodbye to our Facebook family. We love you, we appreciate you, and we thank God for you. Welcome home, and we will see you next Sunday. Thank you, amazing tech team. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And now our grateful celebration, our vision of an intergenerational community that is filled with love and sharing and giving of ourselves and of each other.
You're my life, you're my breath, you're a smile, you're my guest. You're the earth, you're the sun, you're the grass, you are love. You're my hands, you're a bug, you're my eyes, you're a hug. You're the light in the dark, you're the spark, you are fun. You're my mom, you are water, you're the stars, you're my daughter. You're my friend till the end, you're my dreams, you're my father. You're the ants on the ground, the miracles that surround. I'm feeling it all around, the hemisphere in the clouds. You're my pain, you're my sorrow, you're my hope for tomorrow. You're the strength when I'm hollow, you're the path that I follow. You're the blessings that exist, the small things that are bliss. The gift to realize that everything
all that
is a gift.
I am, all that I see, all that I've been, and all that I'll ever be is a blessing. It's so amazing, and I'm grateful for it all, for it all. Grateful for it
You're the
all.
blessings every time I try to count. You're the lessons that I learned every time I turn around. You're the water when I'm burned every time I think I found everything I'm looking for. You're the sign saying stop to take a bow and keep moving forward. And and start looking towards your heart. It'll open all the doors, and only then you'll start to hear the world singing chorus with your mind and heart. Aligned in purpose, everything
All
will feel
that I
gorgeous.
all that I see, all that I've been, and all that I'll ever be is a blessing. It's so amazing, and I'm grateful for it all.
Every day I sit and pray, cause what I have is more than I deserve or could ever imagine. How do I give back to all of this magic and spread the love so everybody can have it? Doesn't matter if I'm rich or poor, if I got a family or if I'm all alone. Bad things happen, I can just complain and moan. Well, there's a million things that I can be grateful for.
So I lift up my hands now, and I open my heart, and my gratitude goes out to everything near and far. All that I am,
Everything I am and everything I see, everything I hope and everything I dream, everything I feel and everything I be. I look deep down and feel all the blessings. Everything I am and everything I see, everything I hope and everything I dream, everything I feel